All right, team. We are back in the Fireside PM podcast, and I have Chad McCallister back on the show. I think the last time we talked, Chad, must have been like maybe 3 years ago, or I don't know. It was a while ago.
Yeah, I
How
was gonna
have
say
you?
2 or 3 years.
Yeah, how have you been?
Been doing well. I still continue with my professor hat on, teaching product management, innovation management, and occasionally working with companies. The big activity for me since we talked, I got asked to help out with a book project, and that finally got wrapped up. And I just got the news, I think Thursday, a few days ago, that it is in print. So Wiley has it being printed as we speak.
Well, congratulations. I put a link to the Wiley listing in the description so people can check
Oh,
out the
thank you.
book if they're interested. What was that like working on a book? It sounds like a pretty big project.
Yeah, it took more time than I expected, for sure. We spent, I think, about a year and a half working on this together. There's three of us on the author team. I've published a previous book just by myself before, and then contributed to a book before that. But this was the third edition of P.D. May's Body of Knowledge. So as a third edition, I kind of thought like, this won't be as much work as writing a book from scratch.
Mm,
But one thing we did, and this was my responsibility, was to edit the entire book, the second edition.
okay.
And so that at times I thought, this might be easier to write from scratch than to just edit. That was a interesting process. And we added a lot of information. We moved some things around. We made some things more clear. But this is the body of knowledge that PDMA has been researching now for about 50 years. When I came to product management, this is the group that told me there was such a thing called the discipline of product management, right? And still, most product managers, I think, don't know about this professional association. It's very much like the Project Management Institute,
Mm-hmm.
but it's for product people, right? And they've been around since 1976, right? Some people don't even think about product going back that far, but product management disciplines have been around for quite a while.
What do you think is the reason why it doesn't have more awareness? I mean, clearly there's, well, I don't know if it's clearly, but it seems like there are more and more people interested in product management than there were, years ago.
Hmm.
Um, you would think that, if there's an organization that's been around for decades around this profession, that everyone would know about it.
Right. Yeah, you would think so.
Yeah.
I do think this is kind of the cobbler's kids phenomenon, right? That
Hmm.
the cobbler's kids never have good shoes because he's too busy making shoes for everyone else, right? And it started as and still is, it's a volunteer-ran nonprofit organization. And people that are really good at product management, product development, and have trouble finding the time, I think, to do the marketing of the association, right?
Hmm.
So it's not super well known here, at least. When I say here, we're in the U.S. Interestingly enough, the group has been found by some other countries and is really very very well known in some other places. So product management is picking up in other parts of the world faster, and the U.S. is kind of seen as a place that is leading, I think, often in the discipline. And so this organization has a lot of credibility. So other places in the world have stumbled upon it and been using it as well.
What do you think were some of the biggest changes that you had to make between the second and third edition? Where as you're reviewing the second edition, you're like, oh, I see why that made sense
Hmm.
at that time, but things have changed now, and we need to kind of update this section, or that approach really is no longer considered the best practice. Or
Yeah, sure. Yeah. If I can, I'll just give you a brief history kind of
Mhm.
how one creates a body of knowledge. Apparently, when this first got created back in 1976, when the association got formed, it was primarily some academics. Bob Cooper, who's pretty well known for portfolio management and StageGate and his book Winning for Product, Winning at New Product, and some other people involved thought, we're doing all this research about how companies are actually succeeding in innovating new products. Let's get that into the hands of people that actually need it, and that was I'm told that was kind of a driving motivation at that time. Um, and the body of knowledge became when I got I ran across the association literally in a Google search because I was running into problems. I did the project management path, and that helped a lot. But there were still things we were missing developing product. And Google search let me stumble across this PDMA group. And at that time, this was like 2006. At that time, the body of knowledge was just pointing to a collection of resources, right? Read these books and these articles, and that encompasses the core aspects of what you need to know as a product person. And then several years later, I think 2016 was the first attempt at putting that together in its own book. So now it's kind of like the guide to the body of knowledge, right? Putting that together. And then the second edition about 3 years later, and then this third edition. And, on one hand, some things are very slowly moving. The, fundamental innovation process isn't radically different over the last few decades, right? We still want to uncover the customer's problem and validate a solution with them, right? Make sure we're on the right path, and then develop that and manage it in the marketplace. But other aspects certainly have changed. AI has become a factor, so something to be thought about. There's tools that get created all the time, and most of us are probably familiar with design thinking, so that deserves probably more attention. Open innovation has become a thing in the last decade, and things to include. So the overall framework doesn't really need to change. We haven't seen a reason for that, but the tools that get slotted in, they change from time to time, and should be talked about.
Chad, what's your take on like the whole impact of AI on product management? I part of me feels like, well, we've seen new technology emerge every few years, but the fundamentals of product management have been pretty constant. Do you think that's true with AI, or do you think actually no, this is like going to be completely transformational for how people do product?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I don't know if any of us have a clear handle on that, right? So I woke up to a headline this morning that said AI is the extinction event for mankind coming. Um, I was having a great conversation with a CEO friend just last week, and pointing out that if someone was alive in like 1900 and woke up in the 1960s and missed all that growth, they wouldn't really recognize the world around them, that it would be radically different, right? But if we go from 1960 to like 2020, kind of where we are now, another 60-year period, we would recognize things, right? Downtowns would still kind of look like downtowns. There's still skyscrapers, and technology sure would be different, but not the things we imagine, right? I'm a child of the 80s, and Popular Mechanics was one of my favorite magazines at the time. And because there are always great, cool things on the cover, right? There was the flying car that you would see, and the George Jetson type house with the robots keeping the house clean for you and cooking and things. And I think we had this expectation that rate of change would continue. And in specific areas for sure, but just macro level, looking around, not as fast, right? And I suspect that AI is going to be more significant than the internet was in the late 90s, that we're going to see it impacting us in positive ways and perhaps negative ways at times as well. And some big changes are coming, and just how we look at the world, perhaps. But for product people right now, and I'm not the one closest to this, I've seen others talk about it, and I'm sure you have good experience too, right? Would love to hear about that. Using it to help us uncover a deeper understanding of problems at times, maybe to get started on some customer insights. That seems like useful tools for it right now. Instead of going out and mining social media by hand, we can get AI to do some things for us and speed up some of our work. And that's helpful. We'll see where it ends up going. It's going to be an interesting journey to watch.
Yeah, it's I heard this analogy last year around AI where there was this comparison of the streets in the kind of street system in Boston versus New York. And Boston streets are like cow paths that they paved over.
Hmm.
And when they developed, asphalt and cement and stuff, they just put it over and it made it travel faster on those existing streets. And then New York was kind of designed for efficiency from the start. So it has that kind of grid system. And so the argument was that, well, a lot of people are going to use AI the way Boston used asphalt and cement, and that will be helpful.
Hmm.
And then there will be some companies that are kind of AI first, that are going to be completely built with that in mind from the beginning. I don't know that we've seen that yet, but it does make me wonder, like, well, would that apply to product management? I mean, right now I use AI to kind of do what I've always done faster. Like, oh, I need to research this thing. I need to summarize this long
Right.
document. Great. I'll save some, I'm going to cut off 20-30% of the time I would normally spend. But I don't know if it has fundamentally changed the notion of identify a big problem, understand the customer, develop hypotheses, test them, iterate, yada, yada. Like, to me, those are like the laws of gravity that they don't change that much, but who knows? Like, maybe they will. I don't know. Do you think 10 years from now, PMs will still be following some of those kind of key, processes, or do you think it'll be completely, the role will be unrecognizable to us?
All we can do is speculate, right? So, there's like your Boston Road analogy. There's always the pressure to just make things faster,
Hmm.
and at times that can erode quality, and we see examples of that, right? Right now going on in the marketplace, where the desire to drive out cost and make things faster is decreasing quality in some products and services. But where AI might end up with us, I think in 10 years, I sure hope that there's still a human in the loop, understanding where things need to go. At least right now, what AI is doing is it's a great pattern recognition engine, right? Which is basically what our brains are. But at some point, it might get better than our own pattern recognition for sure, and being able to see what customers' problems are and what they actually need. It's not there at the moment, and there have been some attempts at using it to like develop strategy for organizations, right? To develop the 5-year plan, and these are the things you should go after. But it's doing that based on the existing patterns that are known, and we haven't seen good success yet with the outcome of that. So I don't know. I think your analogy works well. The internet was all about speeding up what we did in the beginning.
Hmm.
Digital transformation for organizations started in the same way, right? That it was, well, let's make our manual processes faster. Let's provide some self-service activities to customers, make it easier for customers to interact with us. And we have seen that migrated to, well, now it's inherent in organization strategy, right? We're not just talking about automating customer processes. We're really thinking about fundamentally how does a digital first approach impact organizations. And as you said, I suspect the same transition will happen with AI, at some point too. It feels like it changes so very quickly, doesn't it? Compared to other step functions that we've seen, like, mobile phones going from 1G, 2G, 4G, 5G. AI is not doubling every year. It's the magnitudes of
Yeah.
order of more progress.
Yeah. I mean, it feels like it's improving every month almost. And you can just see it. I mean, and it is so impressive how just even in the last 2 years, how it went from like, oh my God, it's kind of like it'll write a poem for you or tell you a joke, haha, to, oh, it's kind of good, but it gets a lot of things wrong, to now where it's like, it's pretty good. It still gets things wrong, but less than it did a
Right.
year ago,
Right.
a lot less. And I think people are willing to go from like, parlor tricks to like, no, I'm just going to use this now for my day to day. And yeah, it'll be exciting. I wonder what advice you would give, Chad, to PMs out there who are like, hey, um, in light of this big kind of technological kind of revolution, how should they think about boning up on their product management skills and capabilities? What advice
Yeah.
would you give them?
Yeah, I find the fundamentals don't change really, right? We all need a strong foundation. And what's really interesting to me, this body of knowledge that we were talking about before, the I had been working as a product person for 10 years. I had the title project manager, software project manager, but we were developing product, right?
Hmm.
And just didn't recognize that. And when I discovered this body of knowledge, and so just a disciplined way to organize the work that we do, right, and think about it. It was there were so many good aha experiences, right? And my discovery was simply there was a local chapter, so this association has had lots of local chapters in cities. Fewer now, more things are virtual now, but used to have quite a few. And I started attending the local chapter in Denver, Colorado, and got on the board and helped out with that. And the board was new. We had a new board except for one person who had been president before, and we all were kind of looking at each other, going, "Well, what does this group really mean when they talk about the body of knowledge? Well, why don't we study it together? They offer
Hmm.
professional certification, so we can study for that and see what they mean." And that was really good. And I just had so many aha experiences, going, "Oh, my 10 years of experience started making sense. Putting some of the puzzle pieces together I hadn't thought about before." And what strikes me so much is I've tried to, my involvement with this has been, and I should have mentioned this book project was all a service project, right? PDMA is a volunteer organization. We're just providing our resources and time to help further along materials for product managers. So anyone that buys the book, I don't see a penny from it. So that's just to be clear about that. But when I have helped others have that same sort of experience and learn aspects of this body of knowledge, often the people that care about it, frankly, have 5, 10, or even 20 years of experience in product.
Hmm.
And they're going, okay, like most of us, we came into product from some other discipline, and we're learning the ropes as we go, right? Through experience and through what we can read. And there's lots of good resources. Your podcast is a great resource, your YouTube channel. So good resources for us, but there's not this integrated view, right? And the framework, the body of knowledge created that for me. And I still find, even today, when we're talking about, well, maybe the product management will look really different in 3 years because AI will be doing X, Y, Z for us and be different. Most of us have some holes in our fundamental understanding. There's some things missing in the knowledge base, and filling those in can be really helpful. And so I think at least taking time to look at some foundational concepts and making
Hmm.
sure we're grounded in that will give us a better understanding of being able to adapt whatever comes next. And one way I've heard people talk about this is people that have the same experience as me. I usually talk about it in terms of these aha experiences. I've heard others say, well, we had a process at work, right? I started doing the product job, and there were others doing it before me, and there were processes in place, and I
Hmm.
followed the processes. And so I knew how that worked, but frankly, I never understood why. I didn't understand why we did some of those things. And there were some things I wanted to change, but I didn't really have a good reason, right? Except maybe some friction I run into. But I couldn't really think through about why we might do things differently. And so getting grounded on the foundation of things we should know, that answers that why part, right? We not only know how to do things, but now we know why we do them as well. And I think once we have that why understanding, we'll be able to adapt in a more effective and efficient way when it comes to anything new down the road.
Yeah, I'm looking at the body of knowledge kind of topics that you shared with me before the show. I'll put that on the screen.
Hmm.
Um, none of this seems like something that would fundamentally change with Gen AI. I think all of these would be improved. Like, um, you could come up or evaluate strategy using some Gen AI tools. You could maybe, assess your or summarize your current portfolio performance. You could use do a bunch of things to improve process. You could start, generate designs, conduct maybe secondary market research.
Hmm.
Culture and teams. Well, that would be weird. Not weird, but that would be interesting if Gen AI affects that. That seems to be very human. Maybe talk a little bit more about the culture and team stuff, because I get so many people in my coaching practice who are like, hey, what can I do to bone up on my technical skills? And should I take a class in prompt engineering? And what I usually tell them is like, that's always helpful. The more technical kind of fluency you have, that can only help you, but that's not your primary role in the product development process. We have engineers to do engineering. Some of these softer skills are the ones that actually separate the PMs that have the most impact.
Hmm. Right.
Yeah, what's your take on the culture and team stuff when you were, coming up with the third version?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So there's these seven knowledge areas, right? And you
Hmm.
hit most of them as you talked through there. And they all relate to each other, right? There's an order that they go in that makes sense. Like strategy gives us the foundation to know what we should be investigating to build, right, based on the
Hmm.
organization. And portfolio management is focused on are we building the right thing? Of all the ways we could use our resources, are we going after the things that make the most sense for this organization? Are we building the right thing? And process is fundamentally, are we building it right? Or, and the like, and other areas in there. The culture and teams underlies all of that, right? And I'll start with the team part. When I am helping organizations learn this body of knowledge, they often realize that there could be more than one team structure for the work that they do.
Hmm.
And usually when they start a project, there's a team structure that they're used to and they use. And for most organizations, it's a matrix sort of approach, right? And you pull in the different people from functions on a part-time basis that you need. But there are other team structures, and just being aware of that is really enlightening. That if we have a high risk, short time frame sort of project, we probably want a different sort of team structure than just a functional, lightweight sort of team structure. So, being aware of the options is the important thing there, which is fundamentally what this body knowledge does, right? It just makes you aware of all the things that one could do, and then you choose the right one for the situation, right, or for your organization. The culture aspect, I really regard culture as a secret sauce for organizations, right? There's that article, and I could share the author, and I might get it wrong, so I won't bother. Um, but that culture eats strategy for breakfast was the title, and
Hmm.
so this was real controversial in business schools at the time when it came out, and in organizations. But there is this, we need both, right? We need a clear organizational strategy that creates a competitive advantage, but we also need the right culture to support that. And culture is this amazing thing that enables behaviors, enables the ability to get things done, to respond quickly when things are changing in the business environment, or to inhibit it, right? And say, nope, that's not the way we do things around here, and we're not going to look at that. And so you want to pay attention to the direction your culture is going in to be able to support what you want to be in the future, right? And that's why organizational vision is an important idea. Sometimes organizations say, well, vision seems like this outdated concept, right? We know what our purpose is, we know what our mission is, but vision is still this idea of where you want to go in the future,
Hmm.
and your culture needs to support that. And part of the culture should be, well, are we able to embrace, are we looking out for the new things that might come that will impact our business? Are we able to embrace them quickly? And are we able to pivot when we need to based on things that come our way? And AI is clearly one of those, right? Supply chain challenges are clearly one of those that we saw in the last few years. The culture is very important for organizations to be able to respond to that business environment. and also to recognize the the value of the intellectual property that we all provide to get anything done, right? It's the humans involved, and I think we've seen a good switch in the last couple decades from not everywhere by any means, but at least leaders becoming more conscious of the value of employees and letting them show up as themselves and contribute to projects and bring more to what we're trying to get done and treat people as humans and not just cogs in a system.
Speaking of culture and technology, I think the whole Zoom revolution and distributed
Mm-hmm.
teams was a really interesting moment for teams to kind of reassess and reconfigure how they work together. And it's so interesting that I remember in 2020, 2021, it was like, oh, the office, the physical office is like a relic of the past. And companies were trying to outcompete each other by how distributed they could be. And bragging like, oh yeah, we're not going to have any offices, that kind of thing. And the pendulum definitely has shifted perhaps a little bit towards maybe the hybrid approach. I think one of the things I noticed was how it did impact the culture of teams
Mm-hmm.
when people had so little time in person together. And I definitely think it was harder. It was, you could do like typical execution, like project status, like make small decisions. That was fine. But if you had to make big decisions or do longer term planning or debate really kind of fundamental issues, it was just hard to do it purely over, Zoom or equivalent. And we really did have to literally get in a room, sometimes, out even off campus and go somewhere else to really, um, you know, sort things out.
Right.
And I don't think we realized it at the time how much the culture was being um, kind of taxed by this new technology, which on paper seems so good, but it definitely came with trade-offs. And I wonder if Gen AI will also have impact on culture uh, in ways that we won't anticipate. Like maybe that magical kind of group brainstorming session will be less frequent because people will just be, you know, talking with Claude or Gemini or whatever.
Right.
And yeah, I'm curious, like, Chad, when you look at the culture of product management and product development teams over the years, what are some things that you think will always be true and important?
Bringing up the move to remote
Yeah.
teams with obviously COVID was the catalyst for that. And the other challenge with that, right, wasn't just that we were moving remote. We were fearful at the time as well,
Mm-hmm.
right? A lot of us did not know what was going on with this COVID. How big of a deal was it? What's going to happen to the future of mankind?
Mm-hmm.
So there was fear involved too, and that impacted the everything. But my emphasis in my career has largely been on the front end of innovation. So it's, where do those ideas come from and what do we do with them? Do we have a proper understanding of the customer's problem? And we build some prototypes and we figure out that we missed some things and we, try to realign with what actually adds value for the customer. And in that, it seems like the in-person collaboration is pretty valuable. There are things when you try to do it online that get lost a little bit. And this is only anecdotal. I haven't read any research about this, but 3M is well known for innovation, right? They're, I don't know, 100 something years old now, right? And they were the first company I knew of that apparently I've read from the beginning, I don't know when it was actually instigated or instituted, I should say, a 15% rule, right? So like Google at one time was famous for the 20%
Mm-hmm.
rule. So but 3M has always had the 15% rule and apparently still does today, that your 15% of your time each week should be spent on your own project, investigating some new, innovative idea. And when we try to come up with insights, there's some specific skills that we can use for coming up with a new insight for creating value for a customer. Things like doing experiments and asking questions and associating information. One of my favorites, doing observations, right? Observing people, whatever the problem is they're trying to solve, just observe them in their environment and get insights. That's been very helpful for me. And one of them is networking. And networking means we're interacting with others and sharing our ideas and our insights and what we've learned, and letting others help make them better or redirect them, and kind of doing that improv. If you've ever done a improv game thing, right? The yes and sort of thing, right? We're bouncing ideas off each other and trying to make them better. And so we know networking is a very important activity for innovation. And sure, that can happen over email some, and it can happen in remote meetings. And we have a mural session up, and be working on a virtual whiteboard together. But 3M has noticed, at least this comes to me anecdotally, that a lot of their original innovations, the networking activity that was helpful happened in their cafeteria. So on their organizational campus, it was lunch discussions that fueled the making those ideas better, and then figuring out who the right resources are to talk to further that, and to get involved and start making something real. And we've all gotten pretty good at the remote environment. Frankly, it didn't impact me at all. I've been remote since 2000 in the work I do. And I was actually quite jealous, because people were talking about, well, now I have all this extra time. I'm not driving, 3 hours or 2 hours, or, depending where you live, each day, dealing with work and other stuff. And like, wow, I've always, for much of my career, I've worked remotely. So, but we lose something when we're not also doing those in-person interactions. And I think it's easier maybe to not engage in conflict some of the time, maybe remotely. When you're in person, you might have no choice. And I'm talking about conflict in the positive sense, right? It's like, Tom, yeah, I like where you're going with that, but here's the issues I see, right? And how can we make this better together? And pursuing things that high-performing teams, that's a frequent characteristic. They know how to engage in conflict to make things better. And we need, I think, that in-person interaction, maybe not throughout product projects, but seems to be really helpful on that fuzzy front end when we're doing the initial formulating and trying to figure out what to actually solve for the customer.
Yeah, I think one of the things I've noticed with the in-person meetings versus the virtual ones is, when you're in person, a lot of people may be suspicious of the move to return to office and stuff like that, but saying, oh, it's just like a control thing. But
Right,
I
monitoring.
actually think it's a sort of high bandwidth communication opportunity, where, if you and I were having this conversation in person, we'd just be able to kind of read signals that is hard to do even over 1080p,
Right.
And when you have a group of people that are able to do that, and then also spend sometimes like half a day together, if it's like a summit or a workshop or something, it's not going to you're not going to be able to do that with a half day Zoom meeting. Like that's
Right.
you're just going to reach a
Right.
diminishing point of returns there that you're going to get when you're in person, and you're in a break between sessions, and in the hallway, and at the filling up your coffee cup or whatever.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think those are the key moments, right? Because
Yeah.
I'm a high introvert, right? So I have learned to be a practiced extrovert, but on the Myers-Briggs scale, I'm a high introvert, which fundamentally means I'm very reflective. When you're
Mhm.
talking, I'm thinking about that. I may even look like I'm not engaged because I'm being trying to take in what's being shared. And in a meeting, introverts are doing that,
Mhm.
and that's why we get really tired when we're in meetings with groups, because we need to be by ourselves later to recharge a little bit. But a lot of the time, I find myself as an introvert, and maybe a lot of people do this, right? But it's those times like in a meeting, information shared, we have this discussion, have the 5 minute water break, and I go, oh, here's a really, I need to know the answer to this, or here's a point that
Mhm.
we really need to discuss, right?
Mhm.
And come back and want to, share that, or maybe grab you at the water fountain and
Mhm.
say, or the coffee maker and say, hey, we need to think about this too. Or did you, have you come across this? This seems like something for us. And in the remote meeting environment, we don't really have that stimulus is different. And we often don't have that follow up, right? We have the hour meeting to address what we're doing. And then
Mhm.
someone thinks of something later. It's like, oh, I'll take care of that over email. And sometimes that doesn't even happen. And I think we're missing some cycles of just what happens with collaboration between us is we are generating more ideas through that collaboration. And we're assessing the information in a different way. And there's more cycles for feedback and action that we probably aren't seeing so much in the remote environment. And I'm sure there's some remote facilitators that are really good at this and would say, we can get pretty close. But for most of us, we're not there, right? But when I mentioned the remote thing, just kind of passed me by. A lot of people that I talked with, and you saw this in the news all the time, they talked about Zoom fatigue, right? It's like, oh,
Mhm.
I'm on my 3 hours of Zoom meetings today. I dealt with that a long time ago, right? Zoom did exist, but there were other tools, and so it was a nothing to me, right? And so we do get better at this over time, just through exposure to it. Um, but I don't know. It seems like it's a little bit, in some ways, artificial, and I sure hope we get to interact with each other and not have that replaced by pure remote work.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would imagine that the organizations that are able to use the virtual meetings and get the efficiencies out of that, and then strategically enable and require and support that those in-person kind of magical moments,
Hmm.
like they're gonna be the winners. They're gonna be ones that are gonna have that aha moment, 10% more than
Right.
the second place, provider.
Right.
So yeah, it'll be fun to watch. Now we've got, how do we figure out how to use like all of the virtual meeting capabilities that are available now, and then how do we use Gen AI? Who knows what these teams are going to look like 10 years from now? It's super exciting. And I know we could talk forever, but it's also the weekend, and I know
Right.
you've got, I'm sure you have other things that you could be spending time on. I really appreciate you coming on the show, Chad, and catching up. It's been a delight, and I encourage everybody to check out the third edition of the Book of Knowledge.
I appreciate that, Tom. And I am delighted to spend my Saturday morning with you and getting to talk about this. And real quick, if anyone wants to know about those 7 knowledge areas and find out more about them, I do a podcast as well on these things. And that's the Product Mastery Now podcast. And same website, productmasterynow.com. You can find out more about what these knowledge areas are and get some resources.
Love it. Well, we'll talk to you hopefully soon and continue
Most
the
definitely.
conversation. Take
Thanks,
care,
Tom.
Chad.
Take care.
Bye. All right. That was Chad McCallister. He and I always have a fun conversation. I feel like maybe it's two introverts kind of talking about product management and who are kind of love geeking out about the nuances of product management, which is probably why you're watching this. What are some takeaways from this convo? Let me think of three. The first is, check out that PDMA association and the Book of Knowledge, the third edition, especially if you're new to product management. Like those 7 fundamental areas, I can confirm they're all crucial. Um, and they probably won't change that much in the next 5 years. Like maybe how you do them changes, but what they are and why you do them, that won't change, I think. The second thing is Chad's a pretty thoughtful guy. He's got a PhD in innovation, and he's not super flashy, but he's very kind of diligent about how he thinks about product management. So encourage you to check out his podcast, Product Mastery Now. And I think the third thing is, as PMs, yes, technology is amazing, and especially Gen AI. Like I'm, I'm now at a point where I'm expecting to be amazed, every few months in terms of like the next leap forward. Um, Ultimately, we're still in the business of trying to solve customer problems in fundamentally better ways. And whether we use Gen AI to improve how we do that, the process of building those types of products and services, or if we embed or harness the power of Gen AI in the actual products and solutions, and it's probably more of an and than an or. Um, Ultimately, that's not going to be that different than what we did with mobile, social, the internet. Um, what some people were trying to do with blockchain. Uh, so this is very cool. I'd be curious to hear in the comments below if you think that some of the latest Gen AI stuff has changed how you do product management. Uh, has it? I, my hypothesis is that it accelerates it. It helps you do things faster. It maybe helps you identify blind spots. Um, but I'd be curious if people have seen examples of where outside on the actual product you deliver, is it fundamentally better? Like, when I think about it, I see a lot of Gen AI stuff now kind of introduced into existing products. And I can't say that I found one that has been a game changer, with one exception, actually. Um, I was using CapCut to take these long form podcast interviews and slice them up into logical segments. And I have to say, it was pretty amazing. I think what they do is they go from audio to text. They take that text transcript and then they do some kind of summarization into logical kind of blocks, and then they timestamp it, and then they turn those into short videos. But the fact that you can do that in one click, like, that's pretty incredible. And it's more than, oh yeah, they're just doing something that you would have done anyway, but it's 20% faster. Like, that's an example where I would never have done that. Like, I just don't have enough time to do that. So it's either like I do it or not. And so that's pretty cool. But let me know in the comments, if you're using Gen AI as a PM to how you do your day to day, or B, if you've seen products, maybe it's your own, where you've used Gen AI and it really is like night and day. Be curious to hear it. Hopefully, we'll keep watching this and more magic will happen. In the meantime, have a great day. And also, if you are interested, I'm starting a new class, product management class on Maven. You can find it at maven.com/Tom L. And it's going to be about PM product reviews, how to kind of really nail them and kind of upskill your impact, from setting up the review to pre-wiring to tight executive summaries to strong decks to presentation and management of the review itself. So that's definitely an inside baseball class. And then that's in May. No. Sorry, that's in April. It's in April. And then in May, I'm thinking of doing one around business strategy for PMs who don't have MBAs. So we'll take, I think, 4 Harvard Business School cases, strategy cases that are usually from the tech industry. And we'll go through the process that B school students do in a kind of condensed format. So it'll be like your kind of little taster of what it'd be like in business school. So that's great for PMs who maybe might be more technical, or they're PMs who, for whatever reason, like it doesn't make sense to go to business school for 2 years, but you can get a little taste, at least on the strategy side. And then I might do like a PM boot camp as well for kind of people very new to the profession. But that would probably be in July. But let me know in the comments if you have any thoughts about any of this stuff, and have a great rest of your day. Get back to work.